Our first panel is entitled Modern Data Architecture, and it'll be moderated by Kim Laubscher, Partner Data Analytics at EY. Kim, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Laubscher, and I'm a Data Analytics Partner at EY. I'm delighted to be here today, and it's the first session too, to be the moderator for the Modern Data Architectures panel. We're all aware that the rate of the way technology is accelerating just continues to increase, and none more so than in the world of data and analytics systems and platforms. From the old school data warehouses to now the modern day fluid ecosystems, data and analytics systems and processes have been, the way they are designed, built, and the way they interact with each other have vastly changed. I was thinking about opening up the session. I remember a time when we had to provision infrastructure for a project, and that would take 6 months to a year just for the infrastructure. And now within months or even weeks, we're able to stand up a platform, ingest data, and perform advanced analytics to drive business benefit. And I guess that's what leads us here today, is to talk a little bit about next generation data architecture, and we'll also touch on data fabric and how both of those have been applied in organizations to help overcome those age-old challenges that we all see. So data quality, mistrust of data, the complexity of onboarding new data sources. And so these modern patterns really can unlock value for organizations by doing so by developing analytical capabilities, using data virtualization and semantic consumption to really increase the speed to insight, which is so fantastic. And then without further ado, I will now introduce our EY panel members who will join me on the panel. From an Australian office, we have Matthew Signor, who's a director, and he specialises in strategy, architecture, and delivery of data solutions. We also have Oliver Krohne, who's another director, specialises in data transformation, architecture for our financial services and consumer goods customers. And we also have from the UK office, Asolo. He's a manager who specialises in data strategy, operating models, and architecture. Welcome, guys. So we'll kick off with a couple of questions. And Matt, I might direct this first one at you, if that's okay. How would you explain modern data architecture and why modern data architecture?
To Kim, and thank you. Before I get started on modern data architectures, I'd like to set the scene with the types of data architecture still prevalent today. This will better frame where we are heading with the modern approach. Many of these architectures seek to consolidate data into large central data repositories. The workloads are implemented by central data teams whose role it is to interface with business areas, understand their data, define data models, implement business rules, deliver data integrations, reports, and analytics. They are also often responsible for some governance processes, like classifying data, populating a data glossary, and servicing data access requests. The reality is, though, this isn't how it ends up. Governance tools are often an afterthought, meaning only technical documentation is available, which isn't great for business users. The knowledge to accurately implement business requirements is lacking in the central data teams, which results in lengthy delivery times or the solution not meeting requirement. Some business areas consequently choose to roll their own solutions by bypassing the central platform and or duplicating its function. For example, in many organizations, it's not uncommon to see finance, HR, and marketing each owning and operating a data warehouse, reporting, and analytics platform, where they each do something different within their silo. Different technology, different data definitions, and different governance processes. This adds to complexity in bringing data together to use for new investments. A modern data architecture seeks to embrace business individuality by enabling their autonomy. To achieve this, we need to consider some basic concepts. 1, discrete domain ownership or segregation of a business area. 2, self-serve technology platforms that provide foundational technology and governance capabilities. And 3, productization of data so that it can be offered as a service by a business domain. So in short, business domains create data products for use within and outside their organization by leveraging self-serve technologies that guarantee foundational capabilities, regardless of the use case and data format. With this approach, an organization can 1, increase the interoperability of their data systems because they guarantee foundational capabilities. 2, reduce data duplication because data products relate to discrete domains. 3, improve time to market because people with knowledge of the business domain are empowered to self-create. Hope that helps demystify modern data architectures, Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And some of the previous ones you're talking about really rings true, I'm sure, to myself at least, and some others on the call. You talked about data products. Can you expand on that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. A data product is a data system built with interoperable technology that is easy to discover, easy to access, easy to understand, and easy to use. From a technology viewpoint, data products build on service-oriented architectures to inherit discovery, integration, and access properties. It incorporates governance capabilities as microservices for quality, understanding, and usage, and is built on top of highly configurable storage and compute layers with embedded processing patterns. Let me decompose that a little bit more for you. I'll go bottom up. The first layer is storage and processing technology. Above this sits a data specification exposed as metadata. Next is a suite of microservices for data quality, business definition, and classification. Then a security and control layer, which is all surfaced through an interface layer used for consistent integration into the organization. The bottom of the stack is most volatile, while the top is most stable. In other words, we want to be able to pick and choose different storage and compute dependent on the use case while keeping all of the services sitting on top. Through various abstractions, the friction is reduced so that the interfacing layer becomes plug and play. So let's think about this. When creating a new data product, you can search the enterprise marketplace for data you need, identify which service supplies it, gain access based on your role in the organization or request it, self-serve enabling technologies, build and define your data product, and publish it back to the enterprise marketplace as a new node in the data product ecosystem.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt. And I'm sure maybe some of the other audience will have questions a bit later on. So just to let everyone know, we are saving 5 minutes at the end. So please pop any in the chat, and Matt can go into further detail as we approach the end of the session. Oliver, perhaps maybe you can take us through an example of modern data architecture that you've worked alongside or have seen in the market.
Yeah, hi everyone. Sure, I can do that. Also, just to highlight initially, I think every client does it a little bit differently, but currently you're working with a financial services client here in APAC. We support them on achieving the objective to transform kind of their business into a data product driven organization. So what do we mean by that? It's really they want to enable data products through a modern data architecture. And it's really important for them to achieve 3 key things around the operating model, around domains and boundaries between the different business areas, as well as the right technology they want to use for the job to enable the self-serve technology that Matt talked about, and enabling reusable data products so they can share them, use them better in the organization. I think, yeah, so practically what we're doing with them is really breaking down these data products into 3 capabilities: business capabilities, which are the domains and value metrics, so you can make sure the product links to business value. The technology capabilities, really enabling standard patterns for consumption, acquisition, integration, and access, basically for the self-service automation of the technology underneath. And then governance capabilities, really want to inbuild metadata, taxonomies, ontologies, and data quality specifically into the data product. And we're physically working with them to enable those. For every data product, for example, they need to have an interoperable data contract, which is a schema related with metadata to discover it. We've defined with them like 3 access styles. One, for example, event-based, another query or API. and really embedding DQ and rules into those and helping them uplift their current technology platforms to enable those through cloud automation or microservices.
Fantastic, thank you.
Bit
And what sort
descriptive.
of type of business benefits and outcomes has that been driving into the organisation?
Yeah, I think there are a few there. I think one that really sticks out to me, while working with this organization, they organized their data products and the systems around it into kind of different types of product. Some are more foundational, others more advanced. And we see like a lot of uptake in those foundational data products because they become kind of the core of the enterprise. They're around master data, reference data, and it's similar to an MDM program or problem, I would say. But they see an increased level of reuse of those foundational data elements through like the level of reuse that they enable. And part of that is also the increased level of innovation they're getting. So because they have the data exposed on a foundational level, they're getting a lot of kind of use case discovery, innovation going for them, and the data is readily available.
Great, thank you. And maybe a final question from the modern data architectures is around the challenges that you've seen that have been encountered along the way too when implementing and developing modern data architecture.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge I see is even though the technologies, as you mentioned, also we mentioned earlier, are readily available and like fast evolving, but I think still the teams and functions within a business also have still like problems on picking the right technology for the job. They have a lot of experience with technologies they've used in the past or news that come up on the market, but then different areas have different expectations. So it's working through that and picking the right technology for the job that basically works for them. And what I've seen works well is basically down selecting the tools and then providing a tool set catalog. So you have different tools for certain use cases, but you can still have a bit of flexibility in those. And another probably challenge, I think, is also the maturity of the domain. Some domains are very mature, so they already well advanced into advanced analytics, building models and productionize them. Others are using canned reports. So that client has really worked on enabling the modern architecture for mature functions and to help the other functions with a central team to basically uplift their capabilities.
Thanks a lot for sharing that. So in the opening, we talked about two topics. We talked about the modern data architecture and as well as data fabric. So we've covered the modern data architecture, but of course we can come back to that in Q&A, and the panel will be around to answer any questions you may have. But perhaps we can first cover off a little bit about what is data fabric. And Ola, would you like to take this, please?
Yes, thanks.
And how does data fabric fit into architecture? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thanks, Kim. Thanks, everyone. So thinking back to what Matt and Oliver mentioned about how typically you have different business data consumers in an organization. If you think about a typical organization at an even grander scale, you can have multiple lines of businesses as well. What the data fabric does is it tries to help to quickly integrate these various different sources that they might all have differently, and it brings it together by doing things in a very unique way. It does this by using distinguishing features such as knowledge graphs and a semantic model of consumption. So what that does is it embeds the knowledge about data in ontologies, which much more quickly allows you to source and integrate data from multiple sources. And all that does is it enables the modern data architecture that Oliver described earlier.
Fantastic, thank you. What kind of business challenges does it help solve?
The typical challenge that you find that Fabric helps with is around sourcing of data from different areas, especially around third parties or even different lines of businesses. So typically, different targets have got different schemas and different common models. So there's this lack of commonality around sourcing areas. And typically, when you're prepping a data project, the vast amount of time is spent in that data prep itself alone. So sourcing it, cleansing it, transforming it, making it usable. Fabrics, because of the embedded knowledge in methodologies, help with all of this, especially around the auto discovery with the agents as well. So that getting it in the first step is actually the biggest challenge.
Fantastic, thanks, Ola. And I guess, have you seen this recently being applied in an organisation? And could you take us through an example of that if you have?
Yes, I think we're seeing this more and more now. I think most organizations are seeing the value in using the fabric, especially when you're trying to share data with different, as I said, different source targets or lines of businesses or even external parties. And an example of this would be a recent global bank that we've been helping to source and integrate data across multiple different areas. I can go into a bit more detail if that's helpful.
Yes, please, that'd be great.
So this particular global bank, we're looking to help improve their third-party sharing, their risk scoring by using third-party data. And what we were able to help with was looking to help how we use the fabric to integrate that third party's common model schema with the bank schema, and to help use the ontologies embedded in the payments part. We also actually leverage the existing FIBO model, which was overlaid with the bank's payments model, and that was used to create an improved scoring mechanism that was able to help them reduce their credit exposure. Now, the key. Sorry to just quickly add that the key features of the fabric that we actually made use of again was around things like the data virtualization. So this is how we were able to help the bank combine their data with the third party's data without actually moving the third party's data, and providing each party with absolute control of each individual's data. Also, things like auto mapping was used as well, whereby we're able to quickly discover data about the source and target without having to do a lot of manual transformations. And finally, we're also able to use, because we're trying to give them control of the data using multi-tenancy, which meant that the bank and the third party had control of what was shared across each of them.
That's fantastic, thank you. And so how was it better or different from what they had before?
What they had before was incredibly manual. So before, they couldn't even, all they had to do was do a typical extract transform across parties. And so this massively just helped their data preparation processes. It increasingly helped them to be able to onboard new third parties as well. So in the past, they could never onboard new third party sharing partners, and now they can do that very quickly.
Great, thank you. I guess final question before we open up to Q&A with the team is, what were some of the challenges that were overcome for that organisation?
Yes, I think the greatest challenge that we found out was when trying to bring different parties together is the lack of a common shared model between them initially. And so the idea was to help create some kind of schema that was transferable and global. And that's where we leveraged the FIBO model that we built upon, yes.
Well, thanks, Ola. Thank you so much for sharing. What we'll do now is open it up to the audience, and Mike's kindly going to facilitate the Q&A component of the session.
So Kim and team, thank you very much. Some great questions have come in. Let's start out with a question from Hemant. And this is, what will be the first foundational focus area that you advise a unified data governance? How do you pursue that, and how is the setup? In other words, what is that first foundational area to achieve that effect? Kim, I'll leave it to you on who on the team would be best to answer.
Matt, do you want to kick this one off, and we can add if required?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So foundational, the first place to get started is usually with the core system. So where core data is generated, the systems of record. So it's been able to figure out which one of those are the authority sources or applications which are generating it, and then start to come up with, well, how would I form that into a segregated product? And actually, this is a lot of the work that Oliver was talking about later, where they talked about foundational data products and then more advanced data products building on top of that. So yeah, you'll usually start with the systems that are closest to where the data is generated, organize those into various domains, and then look to enable with the technology and delivery mechanisms.
And Matthew, obviously nothing happens without the business case. So if you're architecting the business case, where do you start? And how do you present, what is the elements of the business case to top management to proceed?
Okay. So this is much closer to Oliver's work he's done. I think he was just getting ready to respond to that one too.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Oliver.
No, good. I can jump in here. I think with you, what we've done previously, also what the client has done, is really tied back to business strategy. So, for example, they want to improve. I think that just generic customer effectiveness. For example, they want to understand that customers not churning. Then they really wanted to look into, okay, what data sets are required to deliver that outcome, and how to build a data product that can achieve that. I think it's similar to analytics use cases, but for data products specifically, you can then break them down into the detailed elements and foundational elements that feed into that question, basically. But then it always drives back to the overarching business strategy and what they want to achieve with that. So we're breaking it down that way.
Thank you, Oliver. A question came in from Ravi to all the panelists. So Kim, I'll let you assign it to the team member. What are ways to enforce governance in hybrid environments? And how do we make sure you have golden records that you trust?
Matt, do you want to take this one as well?
Yeah, okay. So enforcement of governance tends to be a problem. What you need to do, what we find works best, is enablement, helping the business units make decisions on their own. A lot of what we're doing is providing foundational capabilities which can automatically do things. For example, it will automatically bring in the metadata, it will automatically generate the lineage, it will prompt data stewards to fill in missing information, and it will also auto-classify. So for example, within microservices, we implement machine learning models which can go through and auto-classify the data. So what we're trying to do is really simplify the governance through automation. So there's not so much of an enforcement, there's more mechanisms being responsible for these things, and so you don't have to run big governance forums and things where you're checking people for compliance.
There's a related question from Raghavendra, and it says, interesting to know a bit more about auto mapping. And can you give us a bit of a tech overview of how this is actually done?
Ola, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure.
Ola would be the one to answer this one, so go for it.
Yeah, thanks. Very quickly. Back in the days, the way that we used to do auto mapping was by just looking at the column headers. But now, actually, what auto mapping does is it looks at the actual fields and takes a very large sampling of fields within the data set and looks at what's similar and looks at what's based on the data tags, what's appropriately similar to a particular field and can be mapped. So the auto mapping technology has advanced significantly in the past 5-10 years, such that you can almost guarantee within about 90% accuracy that what's been mapped is correct, and you only need a human to look at the last 10% or so, because we're looking at actual samplings of real fields and based on types and enriched data, you can be certain that the fields are being mapped accurately and correctly.
Understood. And by the way, Ola, I think you did cover the global bank scenario that we see up on the screen. So there's a question from Darshil that says, in your example of the global bank, approximately how much time did it take to deliver a solution that gave an 80% reduction in cost?
So this is typically over a 3-year program period. And you can add the prep. There's a prep that often takes about 6 months in advance, 6 to 12 months. When you take that over, our program was around 3 years. When we take that multiply over 3 years, that data prep was massively reduced to an 80% period, circa 80% when measured.
And Ola, just in that 3-year response, was it wait 3 years, get the 80%, or was it sort of each year there's a cascading additional?
It is cascading. So by year 3, you're looking to measure at 80%. Yeah, not over year 1. Absolutely.
Great. And Kim, on this question, it's from Bob, and it says, have you seen any examples of more traditional organizations, i.e. companies that are not tech-led, creating and making good use of knowledge graphs, semantic architectures? And it seems that that's one of the foundational pieces that you've discussed. I'm not sure who would best answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually one of the panel members can, but maybe we'll ask Oliver too with his remit of sort of financial services and consumer goods clients, and then we'll hand over if anyone's got more to add.
Yeah, I think it's we see that as well. I think they normally start like with a distinct use case and small like foundational platform and foundational products. So nowadays, I think most of them start, also if they haven't had anything, they start in the cloud and start like with a small piece to get going.
Understood.
That or Ola,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah. I was going to say, does Ola or Matt have any other examples as well?
Sorry, we're talking about knowledge graphs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're seeing it, knowledge graphs getting used a lot in areas where there's complex networks. So particularly around fraud. So non-tech savvy companies are using it for, say, looking at their business and looking at fraud. So they can look at the interconnectedness of who they're doing business with, the different supply chains and things like that. And they're able to form these complex graphs and networks, which they can then analyze. And we saw this first happening within cyber and threat analytics. So, detecting threats moving through networks. But this same theory has been able to be applied to just general business interactions through different suppliers and networks of people.
Understood. This is a question, Kim, that has come in from Rohan, which is, how does an enterprise improve data literacy? And what are the key parameters to measure data literacy? And is there a data maturity framework to refer to for that?
Well, thank you. Maybe we'll pass it on to Oliver.
I think that's like a good question there. I think there are many maturity models. I think DMOC is one, or we use some internally from EY as well. But I think also like I think it's really looking into how the different functions are mature on that maturity model, and then we usually do like a assessment across different areas of the business, assess where they're at in terms of maturity, how the self-service or use of data, knowledge of data, and do an assessment, and then validate that with the business teams. So that gives you current state assessment. And then I think there are probably different aspects to uplift that. So either through awareness programs, trainings. In one client we've seen they've actually done a whole change management around uplifting data literacy, running boot camps and even like hackathons for more technical people to get that uplifted, or putting that into like a training pathway for kind of their onboarding new people into the business. So we've seen those type of techniques to work through that.
Understood. There's a good question from Chinmoy that just came in a moment ago, which is, what are the typical challenges you faced during classifying the data and its categories while auto mapping and using machine learning during the classification. There's some challenges. What would those be? And of course, I think the companion question is what do you do about those challenges?
I think I can say that one, Kim. I think the big typical challenge that we find when trying to automate is around different classification types and standards. So when you're trying to map to a common standard, you want them to mean the same thing, really. That's what you're doing when you're tagging. And when you don't have the semantic meaning of what a field is, you struggle to accurately map auto map those fields together. So the best solution to this is really around metadata and always trying to tag the metadata. So this is what we'd always encourage. It's the easiest solution to having incredibly accurate auto mapping is when we ensure that there is accurate metadata that like accompany field mapping.
Yeah. This is a good question that came in that goes to the heart of volume and real-time data. It's from Anupam, which is, I have come across on several occasions where in data management, where there's an inability of the underlying framework to handle speed and volume of multi-source data, especially IoT data. How does this framework that you're speaking about handle it?
Matt, would you like to take that? The architecture?
Yeah, sure. So I think what's important to realize about the data product and the modern data architecture is that it's about providing autonomy to business units, and it's also about having a consistent way of representing and accessing across the enterprise. So built within the the technology and enablement part of it, this is where you need to be able to cater for the different integration types. So the IoT versus, say, moving data into a big data lake. Where the value of the data product comes from is the way it's exposed. So, and this also relates back to one of the challenges that that organizations face. It's agreeing upon that technology, and it's about choosing the right ones so that they can enable all of those business supporting processes on top. So considerable amount of time goes into choosing, well, what's the right IoT tech to be using? What's the right storage technology types to handle graph, relational, and document store? So you kind of have to build that up first, build the way those integrations work, and that's similar to how you would plan architectures today. But the value comes in is how you put the business services on top, such as how do we embed the auto classification, the data quality, the lineage, the access control mechanisms, so that all of the processes to access and use are streamlined.
Thank you, Matthew. And Kim, we're out of time, but the audience had more questions. So we do promise everyone that typed in a question, after this event, we will follow up with a written Q&A. So all of your questions will be answered. So Kim, over to you just for final wrap up on how the team can, if anyone wants to learn more, I think you have some contact information here for you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, for Council for arranging us to come on board, and for the audience and for the questions which we will respond to. If anyone needs more information or would like to have a conversation, there's a contact us page on your screen now. You can contact myself or Marshall, and we can best direct your question or query. Thank you again, and thanks, team.
Thank you, Kim. Really good discussion. And John, over to you.
Yep, thank you. And Kim, thank you. And Oliver, Matthew, and Ola for your insights. And Mike, thank you for moderating the questions. Since we have questions coming in from all different directions. By the way, just if you could put your questions in the Q&A instead of the chat, we'll be able to track them a little bit easier. So that would be helpful to us. But again, Kim, Oliver, Matthew, and Ola, thanks for your insights and kicking us off here today. So let's go to our next panel discussion.